Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? It is Tuesday, March 15th. Ooh, it's the Ides of March. Holy mackerel. Someone should have told me to beware, and then I would have been ready. For the Ides of March, Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. Time for another political murder, I guess, and also a show. It's always time for a political murder, don't you think? We love advocating that here because something. All right, well, it does happen from time to time. And look, I hope we all make it home safe today because no one wants to be murdered. There's so many things that we could gather up and share with you under the guise of news today, but instead we've collected a bunch of crap that we will, I don't know. There's so many things. We'll see what we can get to. Lots to cover. More things happening every day thanks to this social media thing where everybody just talks about whatever they want. And a lot of it is interesting, so thank you for sharing all that with me. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That's what this mess is so far. And Bill in Portland, Maine tells me that I now welcome you to, of course, Eastern Orthodox Pi Day. I missed it yesterday. And then I started thinking, did we do anything special for 2015's Pi Day when it was 3/14/15? And I guess not. But that should have been like the biggest Pi Day ever. We didn't do anything in particular. We had big plans that we were going to... The big plan was we were going to have a chicken pot pie for dinner. It was a huge plan. And we still didn't do it, which really tells you something. But anyway, we may have that tonight. So again, we'll be Eastern Orthodox for the day. And Eastern Orthodox Pi Day today. Get out there and make it a great one, kiddo, says Bill. And it's good advice. And you should actually, now that the show is starting, by all means, get out there. Get out of here. This show is going to start. And you don't want to be caught here for 2 hours, do you? No, of course not. Anyway, many things to catch up on today. As I said, I was scrolling back through the Twitter feed. There's a million things I parked in Pocket to share with you. And as I was getting ready, I said, okay, well, I'll start with this. And then I saw that Justice, just giving me the regular thumbs up that everything seems to be working well, brought up the Joe Manchin stuff. And I said, oh, yeah, that was dumb. We could talk about that. And, unconnected to everything else, except if the story is, gosh, Joe Manchin, he really just doesn't know what he's talking about. He's so weird, the things he comes up with to object to good stuff, just so he can be in the news objecting to good stuff. Is what it seems like is going on. I don't know what's happening with him, but in particular. But he was out yesterday, blocking two, apparently good things. One was the nomination of Sarah Bloom Raskin to the Federal Reserve Board, which doesn't make any particular sense to me. He's got some objections. Susan Collins has found some reason to object, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even want to get into what the reasons are, but it was like he was trying to accumulate, anti-Brownie points with the Democratic Party in general. But I learned that shortly after seeing his comments about being upset about, I guess, the inclusion of or the possibility of including federal funding for what I take to be subsidizing construction of electric vehicle charging stations. I don't know where. I guess where they're not now. And he just has this stupid objection to it. And I don't know. I don't know where he thinks he's winning points with this. There are no coal-powered cars. So I don't know what he thinks he's doing with West Virginia. But, plenty of people point out, well, as it happens, sometimes people are heavily invested in the oil that we do use to run gas-powered and diesel-powered cars. And they invest heavily in senators so that we all continue to have to invest heavily in their oil business. And I guess that's what's going on. But I just thought he came up with the weirdest way of of opposing it. I mean, you could certainly have done it by saying, hey, I'm just not that super enthusiastic about adding new subsidies to the budget. And if you wanted to be, intellectually honest about it, you could say, well, we have lots of old subsidies, and I don't really love those either, but we're sort of stuck with them for a while. It's sort of the way it is, and it's unfair that it's that way, but I'm a conservative guy at heart, and I want to keep things the old way. And then you'd say, well, just an idiot. But now you have to say, my God, he's a super idiot because he says things like this. Who's reported this? Catherine Rampell. Is that how she says her last name? Washington Post columnist and commentator with CNN and a bunch of others. She's got 15 jobs. Other people can't get any jobs. She's got 100 of them. Anyway, she reports that Joe Manchin says he's reluctant to support the proliferation of electric vehicles in general. But I think the funding was for charging stations, and I think maybe there's another excerpt somewhere that talks about that. But yeah, he says, I'm very reluctant to go down the path of electric vehicles, I guess in general, Manchin said. And then he's got to do a Manchin here. I'm old enough to remember standing in line in 1974 trying to buy gas. I'll have to stop him there and say, I guess you don't. I mean, you're old enough to remember, but you don't remember because, maybe a figure of speech. I'm sure it is a figure of speech, but we weren't standing. We were in cars, my friend. That's how we were getting the gas. We weren't standing around with gas cans. Although maybe in West Virginia, possibly true. But no, we weren't standing in line. We were sitting in our cars in line in 1974 trying to buy gas. I remember those days. Yes, sad, right? But you'd think like a normal person would say, and so I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to wait in line at a gas station. I want an electric vehicle. I don't have to wait in that kind of a line. But he takes it to be the opposite because of what a genius he is. I remember waiting in line. I remember those days. I don't want to have to be standing in line, waiting for a battery for my vehicle because we're now dependent on a foreign supply chain, mostly China. And does Joe Manchin think that you buy D-cell batteries, maybe 9-volt or 12-volt? Those are lantern batteries. That would probably explain it. But you have to stand in line and buy batteries to put into your car for an electric car to work. I don't know exactly what he's talking about. I mean, I guess it's possible that if you have electric charging stations, and that's the only way you can charge your vehicle, although plenty of them apparently, I guess, can be plugged in with home units, but I don't know. I don't know anything about electric vehicles. But I know, I don't know. I know nothing about it. I see electric vehicle charging stations out there in parking lots, but I don't know. I mean, I'd be a little bit worried about buying one if you couldn't charge it at home at your house. But okay. But I guess it's possible that 2 or more people could want to use the same electric vehicle charging station at the same time, and then you'd have to wait in line. But 1, I have never seen that happen. And 2, the idea is you build more of those charging stations and then there will be less line. I don't understand how he doesn't understand the logic. I don't think we should stand in line, so we should create fewer opportunities to obtain the thing people want, and then yada yada. But he's actually apparently trying to make some sort of a point about how many of the batteries that power the cars are manufactured in China, and then maybe we would be dependent on China to manufacture and ship them to us in the same way or similar ways to which we're dependent on oil-producing states shipping their oil to us so that we can refine it into gasoline, which, okay, that could sort of be a thing. But, again, it doesn't really work that way. If you have the need for an electric charging station, it's because you have an electric vehicle. And if you have an electric vehicle, it's because someone was able to drive it to you, or you were able to pick it up from the dealer's lot because there's already a battery in it. And while it's possible that over the life of their service lives, electric vehicles may require replacing those batteries, I don't know, but not very often. It's not a situation where you have to wait in line for batteries, nor is it at this point a situation where you have to wait in line for a charging station either. They just need them in more places. And I don't know what his problem is. He wants people to pay for oil products, I guess, because he gets sponsored that way in his races. They should be like a NASCAR driver, just wear their logos on his suit, as others have suggested. But yeah, I don't know. I find that really odd. And if you're waiting for the batteries to come in order for them to finish making the electric vehicle you ordered a long time ago, and you're waiting and waiting, I can appreciate the upset over somebody's frustration in waiting for their vehicle to be delivered. But presumably they're just driving their gas-powered car while they're waiting for their brand new electric vehicle. Or maybe even driving their old electric vehicle while they're waiting for their new electric vehicle. Or maybe they've all broken down and they have to take Uber. But then whose fault is that? I don't know. Anyway, it's a nonsensical objection, obviously. And it annoyed a lot of people, and it just, I don't understand what he was trying to make up, and it worries me when senators, get treated by the media as though they are anything other than feeble-minded boobs when they say dumb stuff like this. We have, in our lifetime, there have been senators who say things like, I don't know how an ATM works, or I don't know what a gallon of milk costs, or I don't know why, but I'm worried about this family that needs 900,000 gallons of milk each week, and that's so typical of America, or whatever. And it bothers me that they're so out of touch, but what are you going to do? That's the world we live in. Anyway, so that was kind of weird and crazy. Also in my timeline now, before I scroll back to more current things, maybe we can just do a hodgepodge of dumb stuff I found in my timeline today and not parked in pocket, even though the really important stuff is there too. I got to switch over. But I see this one here. Patriot Takes, which I can't remember whether that's like serious. No, it isn't. Okay. Is that like a serious clearinghouse for things that they actually believe in that is dumb patriot takes, but this person is a dumb patriot? Or is it somebody saying, look at how dumb the people who say they're patriots are? That's it. It's the second one. And Patriot Takes says here, unearthed, Madison Cawthorn, called into the Charlie Kirk show, during the January 6th attack. Again, I guess. I don't know. That's really weird. And said that this is interesting. He said that he used his wheelchair to transport, quote, multiple weapons ahead of the Capitol riot and armed those around him. I'm not certain, from having heard the audio, whether that's what Cawthorn is saying, but what Cawthorn is saying is gobbledygook, and that's one interpretation of it. It's not entirely clear, though. This sort of implies that, I knew the riot was coming and I went into the Capitol armed, and that raises lots of questions like, who did he plan to shoot? If it was the rioters, that would have been interesting. If it was at that point, even he had been sold on the lie that it was Antifa forces storming the Capitol, and then he shot a bunch of his own supporters. That wouldn't be so bad. But I don't know. And also, there's a distinct possibility that he's totally full of it. But apparently, this is from January 6th, and he calls. Of all people, he's trapped in the Capitol in the middle of a riot. He calls Charlie Kirk. Like, that's going to do anything. I mean, I guess, unless it's like, can you go to my apartment and walk my dog? That would be something I guess I might call Charlie Kirk about if I were friends with him. But he calls during the attack, tells everybody he's safe, but then he says, I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment, and as you know, I'm in a wheelchair, so that gives me the ability to transport multiple weapons, which is to say that he uses it like a wheelbarrow, I guess, and pushes a heap of guns. And then he implies that he's armed everyone else around him, and that Lauren Boebert is there, and thankfully she's armed too. But that's kind of an interesting thing. All by itself, the idea that there were armed members of Congress during the insurrection is interesting. Even if they're actually armed because they don't know exactly who's storming the Capitol and they want to protect themselves. Still interesting. But more interesting still, given that, these two particular people probably knew about what was coming. And two, that these two you would have to suspect of perhaps arming themselves so that they could join in the insurrection. And if the people storming the Capitol didn't bring their own guns, I'll give you one that you can shoot Nancy Pelosi with. That's kind of weird all by itself, too. But, on top of it all, calling Charlie Kirk and saying all of this. And it's a little bit, it's a little disturbing. I think there was something else about that. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I can let this audio run. Or it's got the captions here and it can tell me. I have a feeling that I now can't recall that there's something else even dumber in all of this. Oh, yes, that's right. He goes on to say, I believe in the Second Amendment, blah, blah, blah. Then he throws in the other throwaway line, which really is totally inapt at this point, and says, well, an armed society is a polite society. Now, there's a riot going on, first of all. And I don't know, maybe that does make his point. Well, they like to say that they thought that the crowd, the mob, was unarmed. They were armed. There just wasn't a whole lot of firearms there at the scene, but there were some. But also they had baseball bats and, bricks and fire extinguishers. And they were armed. They were ready to hit you and kill you if they found the wrong person. Anyway, but he says an armed society is a polite society, which has always been a dumb thing. Then I realized, he's saying, oh, I carry weapons all the time. And it occurs to me, has anybody ever accused Madison Cawthorn of being polite at all? Not let alone excessively polite because of how heavily armed he is. That's the thing. I can't find anyone in the world who thinks that an armed Madison Cawthorn has ever translated into a polite Madison Cawthorn. It actually turns out that an armed Madison Cawthorn is a mouthy a-hole Madison Cawthorn, and might also be that an unarmed Madison Cawthorn is just as mouthy, but I have the feeling that an armed Madison Cawthorn is actually just a little mouthier and a-hole-ish than an unarmed one. And like I said, I've said many times, or I will now formulate what I have been thinking a lot, which is no one could have predicted that guns in immature hands would do something like this, just become a mouthier a-hole because they're armed. Who knew it was going to happen? All right, many other things happening this morning, many of them happening right now on Twitter, but I'm going to jump back to some of the other things, the other longer reads that I put away to share, and now I got to go about the task of finding which ones they were. Yes, okay. So, one of them, somewhere, was about the idea the Ukrainian biolabs, quote-unquote biolabs, that the right wing are shouting about. It's been a very interesting, somebody has traced the provenance of this story, and it turns out to have, let's say, worked in reverse from the usual pattern. That is that the American right-wing lunatics came up with it on their own, and it's now spread to the Russian propaganda people, and they are picking up on it. NBC News did a whole thing on the provenance of it, and then I saw somebody else on Twitter sharing some online metrics charts showing that mentions of the biolab started among American accounts and then moved to Russian accounts, which is very interesting to see happening backwards, but also interesting that NBC News as an organization would dig down into this. Ben Collins and Kevin Collier put this piece together. QAnon, Ukraine, and, quote, biolabs, Russian propaganda efforts boosted by U.S. far right, which I thought was running in the opposite direction. But the charts say otherwise. I'll put the two stories together. Russian and Chinese officials have also pushed the theory. That's something. That's a great thing for the Chinese to jump on board. They can blame COVID on Ukraine rather than on China, where too many people are putting the blame. Ironically, though, you know, it's people, I don't know, do they care that it's the American right? Like, they don't want to just prove them wrong? I guess diversion is as effective as anything for the Chinese. We'll see what the report has to say. Russian and Chinese officials have also pushed the theory, which has reached mainstream conservative media in the U.S., which is to say, you know, foamy-mouthed idiots, because that's where mainstream Republican thought is. All right. Russia's early struggles to push disinformation and propaganda about Ukraine have picked up momentum in recent days, thanks to a variety of debunked conspiracy theories about biological research labs in Ukraine. Much of the false information is flourishing in Russian social media, far-right online spaces, and U.S. conservative media, including Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News. What do you know? The theories, which have been boosted by Russian and Chinese officials, come as U.S. officials warn that Russia could be preparing a chemical or biological weapons attack of its own in Ukraine. We're not real sure why they're so interested in this. Is it just diversion? Is it just about generating some sort of justification for the invasion? Or is it, as others have theorized, a prelude to the use of chemical or biological weapons? And then when everybody says, oh my God, the Russians used chemical biological weapons, they say, no, it was this lab that we were trying to, close down safely, but they sabotaged it and blew it up as a booby trap, and they did it to themselves. That's the thinking. Most of the conspiracy theories claim that the U.S. was developing and plotting to release a bioweapon or potentially another coronavirus from, quote, biolabs, whatever that could be, and it could be anything, like all the places where you send your PCR tests to be, the PCR ones that you send out to the labs. Anyway, there aren't biolabs that you do that. Anyway, where were we with this? Biolabs throughout Ukraine, and that Russia invaded to take over the labs. Many of the theories implicate people who are often the target of far-right conspiracy thinking, including Dr. Anthony Fauci and President Joe Biden, as being behind creating the weaponized diseases in the biolabs. Disinformation experts said the biolabs theory echoes other Russian propaganda meant to justify its military efforts, which often makes allegations against other countries and populations that reflect similar attacks it plans to make. In other words, the same projection problem that the former guy has. I wonder where he learned that technique. Well, it probably comes natural to big liars. PolitiFact has debunked the theories, and no evidence of U.S.-run bioweapons labs in Ukraine has been put forward. Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, told the Senate Intelligence Committee that the U.S. has no evidence that Ukraine has pursued bioweapons and that the only assistance provided by the U.S. was in the context of biosafety. The biolabs, quote-unquote biolabs, are serving as a false justification for why Russia invaded Ukraine. It's defensive, said Clint Watts, an MSNBC contributor who is a senior fellow at the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security at George Washington University. .edu. It's a long name. I thought I'd add more. They create a situation where they go to a populist audience, push out talking points, get the audience primed, and make it true later. Dropping evidence at the scene, I guess. Gavin Wild, a managing consultant at the Krebs Stamos Group, a security consulting company, who previously was director for Russia, Baltic, and Caucasus Affairs on the White House National Security Council, said the theories appeared to focus on the U.S. Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, which was created to decommission Soviet-era chemical and biological weapons. He said the program has long provided fodder for Russian propaganda campaigns and can be particularly effective on Russian residents. In a media environment almost completely dominated by Kremlin narratives, with few independent or Western outlets remaining, creating a pretext for escalation that the Russian public will accede to using these well-worn narratives is an easy task, Wild said. The biolabs conspiracy theories were almost unheard of until the day of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Pura Technologies, a cybersecurity and threat intelligence company, said the first mention of biolabs came on the far-right social network Gab on February 14th, 10 days before the invasion and Valentine's Day. So probably an incel. Anyway, the user included an awkwardly worded graphic, because incel, entitled Exclusive U.S. Biolabs in Ukraine, and they are financed at the expense of the U.S. Department of Defense. And it doesn't have any punctuation in there, so I couldn't tell whether they meant for it to be exclusive, like this is our exclusive report, or they're just exclusive biolabs. I don't know. And he doesn't know either. The post largely sat idle for days because he's an incel. Everything sits idle. Welton Chang, the CEO of Pura, said the posts about biolabs on the top 15 far-right social networks numbered in the single digits in the days before Russia's invasion, because who cares? But on February 24th, the day Russia began its invasion, and the day after the Kentucky Teachers Union sold all its position in, which one was it? I don't remember. One of the Russian oil and gas companies. On February 24th, the day before the invasion, the day of the invasion, the number of posts about biolabs on English language far-right websites skyrocketed into the hundreds and only grew in the days after. This was before the money spigots were turned off by the sanctions. Boosted by far-right influencers on the day of the invasion, an anonymous QAnon Twitter account titled @WarClandestine pushed the, quote, biolabs theory to new heights using the same, quote, U.S. biolabs graphic initially included on the Gab post that went largely unshared the week before. Twitter said the account and others that pushed the biolabs theory were banned for, quote, multiple violations of our abusive behavior policy. The biolab conspiracy theory has taken over as the prevailing narrative on pro-Trump and QAnon websites like The Great Awakening and Patriots.win. What a fun-sounding place. Chang said the rhetoric on pro-Trump sites, which had largely been anti-Putin in the first days of the war, had shifted because of the biolab conspiracy theory. Oh, so it may have been designed to bolster Putin's numbers where he was miraculously losing support somehow in those early days. These communities already know what the rhythm and cadence of COVID conspiracies should be like to get people to buy it, Chang said. They had a lot of practice with QAnon, the kinds of things that get people excited, like anytime you say secret biolab, it gets people's emotions up. It probably does. Anyway, Russian and Chinese officials have also boosted the theory. China's Foreign Affairs Ministry began pushing it, asking for a full account of those labs. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netflix Radio. Okay, in the middle of trying to send out another tweet on yet another story of another accidental child shooting here. Hold on just a second. I'm going to finish it up. Okay, well, anyway, excuse me while I do some tweeting here, everybody. I just got a note during the break from Truro Renfro saying, ugh, KagroX, because that's me, sending it to me. Sadly, these will probably make their way into your news feed, or maybe not. The accidental shooting, gun fail stories, of course. This is, let's see, a story from Hannah Holland, MD, who says, in the last 24 hours, I have taken care of 2 children with serious gunshot wounds in the PEDS ICU. One a drive-by shooting, and another found a loaded gun in their home that accidentally went off, using that same phrasing. This should not happen, and that's certainly true. And there's more to the thread, and I haven't read it yet in depth, but it occurred to me. And actually, when I was reading it in the last 24 hours, I've taken care of 2 children with serious gunshot wounds, and I wondered, are you in Tennessee by any chance? Because in the last 2 to 3 days, I think 2, 3-year-old and under toddler type kids found unsecured guns at home and accidentally shot themselves or others in the house. And I think we just recently had the other day another like 3-year-old finds gun in mom's purse, shoots and kills mom in Walmart, or in the Walmart parking lot anyway. brings back memories. Of course, it's been a while, though, since 2014, the, unfortunately celebrated case of the 2-year-old who took the gun out of mom's purse while she was shopping in an Idaho Walmart and shot her dead right there in the store. But lest you be one of those types that points out, well, geez, 2014, it's 8 years ago. I mean, that's pretty few and far between. Is it really a serious issue? It's serious enough in that case to make national headlines, but, in case you were wondering, how far back do you have to go to find a toddler who finds a gun in mom's purse and shoots her at a Walmart? The answer is January, because it happened then too. It's just that she didn't get shot dead on the spot in the store. She was shot in the arm, along with the 1-year-old sibling that was shot in the leg, in the car in the Walmart parking lot. So not as spectacular, you see, and doesn't get as much coverage. Also, probably worth pointing out that when it happened in Idaho was a blonde white woman. So national news. You know how that goes. Anyway, yeah, and when things like that happen and we're talking about the little kids with the finding guns and accidentally shooting themselves, I commend to you the phrasing that I've been using for this stuff, and I just wanted to put that out there and say, again, I want to use I don't see how people can continue to believe this is rare, and then the hashtag gunfail and the hashtag, as I sometimes use for these things, protecting the family, and just making note to people, by the way, go search the above phrasing and see for yourself. It's not a hashtag, so it's not quite as easy to look for, but if you go and search that thing, or you can just search if you're in on the lingo and you know what you're talking about. It's easy to remember that you search for me, KagroX, at KagroX, hashtag gunfail, and in the word rare will do it. And then just look at sort by latest, and you'll see what I'm talking about. There's lately, I don't know, it's probably 20, 30 plus of these things in the last couple of months. I've been using that thing over and over. So it serves same function as a hashtag. But it'll give you some idea of exactly how frequently this stuff actually happens. Thought I would share that with everybody, including Dr. Holland here, since she was in the middle of making this point. Okay, let's see. I was still in the middle of reading the story about QAnon and the Ukraine stuff. Not the Ukraine. Not QAnon and the Ukraine, but QAnon and the Ukraine stuff. The bio labs. There's a little bit more to it, and I think they introduce the internet analysts who end up demonstrating the reverse flow of this stuff in these last couple paragraphs. So we left off, I think, by saying that Russian and Chinese officials have also boosted this theory, and the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry began asking, as they said, for a full account of Ukraine's, quote, biological military activities at home and abroad, which should be pretty easy to provide because there haven't been that much, I don't think. By Wednesday, almost 2 weeks after the invasion, the conspiracy theory had reached Carlson, that is to say Tucker Carlson, who led his show claiming that the Biden administration was funding secret biolabs in Ukraine. On Thursday, Russia requested a meeting at the UN Security Council about military biological activities in the U.S. The Kremlin has a long history of planting false reports that the U.S. was developing chemical or biological warfare to distract from its own use of such weapons, said Thomas Rid, a professor of strategic studies at Johns Hopkins University and the author of A History of Soviet and U.S. Disinformation Tactics. I don't know if he pronounces it Rid. It's R-I-D. Who knows? Could be pronounced Ride anyway, but that's the way he spells it, so that's what we'll do. We can throw that in the pile with the people who continue to complain on Twitter that we shouldn't have to say Kyiv. We can go back to Kiev. Like, who changes the names and the spellings? It's the weirdest thing. It's very weird that they're so upset about this, because we've done it a number of times for a lot of cities. And why do we do it? Because the people who live there ask you to. And you say, why not? That's interesting. Okay, I didn't know. Whether we're pronouncing it right or not, I have no idea. But at any rate, in the early 1980s, as Soviet forces deployed chemical agents in Afghanistan and Laos, I think we've forgotten about Laos, the Kremlin tried to distract from such attacks by publishing false tales like the one that the CIA was developing weaponized mosquitoes in Pakistan. That's It's tough work developing weaponized mosquitoes. You got to have the tools. They're so tiny. Anyway, I mean, can happen. Weaponized mosquitoes in Pakistan to spread encephalitis in Afghanistan. Why we weren't working on them in Afghanistan, or it'd be so much easier. We have to fly those mosquitoes first class from Pakistan to Afghanistan. I don't understand. Anyway, there were multiple incidents of Soviet disinformation that involved claims of American bioweapons, including the big one, HIV/AIDS, Rid said. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another attempt at accusing the other side of the thing they are in fact doing, Rid said. Again. Now, the metrics come up here. Signal Labs, which analyzes social media, broadcast, traditional media, and other online conversations. It's a lot. Found that English language influencers helped create the talking points for Russian propaganda. How do you like that? Mentions of the bioweapons lab narrative in Russian doubled on March 6th, about 10 days after the start of the invasion. Signal Labs said in a report, from Wednesday to Friday, Russian mentions of the biolab conspiracy on social media have outpaced posts about the same propaganda in English, the report said. Rid said he sees the theories as playing on some Americans' fears about COVID. For the far right, I think it's also about China and COVID, Rid said. It's all mixed up in this mesh of fear and conspiracy theory about where COVID really came from. It's just something that a lot of people can emotionally relate to because the pandemic affected them so brutally for the past 2 years. Entirely possible, but anyway, dumb and kooky. I mean, possible, but dumb and kooky. That's, that happens. I think it was Lindsay Bierstein that I saw tweeting these metrics around from Signal Labs. And this one is actually linked to Ben Collins himself tweeting about this. Lindsay commenting, strong evidence that the U.S. far right incubated the Ukraine biolabs libel and then Russian propagandists amplified it. Ben himself saying, here's a jarring chart from Signal Labs. The bioweapons were an English language conspiracy theory until last week. Now, most posts about it are in Russian, illustrated by different colors on the chart that he uses. Russia finally found a pretext, post-text, for the Ukraine war, a gift from the American far right. So I guess that keeps the accounts open and contributions flowing both ways, and they'll bill them for it later when the money gets turned on again. I don't know whether there'll be anybody interested in paying once the money gets turned on again, but they're doing it on spec, I guess. So very interesting all in its own right. Other stories to share with you, some of them longer than others, so maybe we ought to get to some of these things. There are a couple of good ones. What are the ones we really need to get to? Politico has interesting news, sometimes. This one from Kyle Cheney. Does he say Cheney? Like they always said that the Cheneys used to pronounce their names Cheney before. Anyway, I don't know. In Politico, this is news. You remember we read the other day, we spent a long time reading about the fact that Roger Stone inexplicably allowed a documentary film company to follow him around on or about January 6th. And wow, that's super dumb. Now it turns out that there are other super dumb people in his circles planning the same thing, and they were equally super dumb. The Department of Justice, according to Politico, says that a film crew was present at a January 5th meeting between the leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. Again, the MFers are taking notes on a criminal conspiracy, or an MF in criminal conspiracy, if I remember the quote from The Wire correctly. The details provide new evidence of the encounter between the two groups, whose leaders played a key role in the breach of the Capitol the following day, illustrated by a dumb picture of Enrique Tarrio. I say dumb because, the guy in it is dumb, and also it's a dumb staging. It's like, how do I look tough for my audience? And the answer is I put on a bulletproof vest, which is really saying I'm afraid I might be shot, but that's not that tough. But anyway, it's tactical looking and cool. And then there's also, he's smoking a cigarette and smoked it all the way down to the butt. And it's hanging out of his mouth, and he's kind of unshaven, and he's got his sunglasses on and his Proud Boys stuff on and a hat. And he's got tucked into his tactical awesomeness vest, where usually you would put extra magazines for your guns. He's tucked a can of White Claw hard seltzer because he wants you to punch him in the face. So maybe that'll help you get around to doing it. But, he really does want you to punch him in the face. I'm not kidding about that. He wants to use that as a pretext to kill you. But so don't. You shouldn't anyway, but the urge will be there. I can tell you that much. So Kyle Cheney writes, prosecutors say a documentary film crew, and that's in quotes, and I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but maybe the story will explain it, was present when Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio, later arrested in his underwear, and Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes, also arrested, but maybe wearing more than that, but only with one eye because he accidentally shot his own eye out with a gun accident when he first got into this tough guy militia stuff. So we were that close. Anyway, a documentary film crew, quote unquote, present when Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes met for 30 minutes in an underground parking garage on January 5th, 2021. Why an underground parking garage? Why? Because they needed it to be a secret meeting. Why then a documentary film crew? Because you are talking about two morons having a secret meeting and the film crew must have been like, can we get any lighting here? But maybe they were into it for the ambiance. And that's probably it, actually. That's really true. And they probably chose the underground parking lot because that's where secret meetings take place. And we need to feel cool about our meeting. Because, one, if they're taping it, it could be anywhere. Two, you know what's a great place for, real privacy? Indoors. Try that. Anyway, while in the parking garage... Oh, I'm sorry, I missed something else. The details revealed in a Justice Department court filing on Monday provide new evidence of the encounter between the two groups, whose leaders played a key role in the breach of the Capitol the following day. I bet you didn't know that. Glad I went back. While in the parking garage, Tarrio told another individual that he had cleared all of the messages on his phone before he was arrested. Now, this was his prior arrest. I don't know if it was his first arrest, but this is when he was arrested ahead of January 6th because... you may recall the Proud Boys came into town early to make extra trouble and practice making trouble before the big day when they were going to make trouble. And one of the troubles they made was pulling down the banners, the Black Lives Matter banners from a church, a black church, but could have been any church, but as it happens, it was a black church. And they pulled it down and set it on fire. And he got himself arrested for that ahead of January 6th. And he actually, I think had his firearms confiscated and he got kicked out of D.C. That's why he wasn't physically at the Capitol, allegedly, on January 6th. He was somewhere else obeying the law somewhere. It's amazing. How did that happen? Anyway, while in the parking garage, Tarrio told another individual that he had cleared all the messages on his phone before he was arrested, right? That's what prosecutors wrote in filing a filing urging a federal magistrate judge to detain Tarrio pending trial. Tarrio further stated that no one would be able to get into his phone because there were 2 steps to get into it. I bet you never heard of the 2-step thing for authentication. Anyway, again, not something you want to record. Oh, I destroyed all this evidence. Prosecutors say that after Tarrio left Washington, D.C. that night, part of a court order that he stay away from the city while facing charges related to his conduct during a December 2020 rally, he traveled to Baltimore. That evening, Tarrio used the phones of associates to make a number of phone calls and to log back into his encrypted messaging accounts, prosecutors say. After having regained access to his accounts, Tarrio assured his men that his phone had not been compromised. He just wasn't using it for some reason, i.e. it was compromised. Reuters first reported on the existence of the Tarrio-Rhodes meeting and the FBI's interest in it last month. The new details suggest Tarrio played a more direct role than previously understood in orchestrating the events that occurred on January 6th, when top Proud Boys leaders were at the vanguard of a mob that overran police lines and threatened the presidential transfer of power. Prosecutors have charged Tarrio, along with 4 other Proud Boys leaders, with conspiring to obstruct Congress that day. They also charged the 6th member of the group, Dominic Pezzola, who they say was the first to physically breach the Capitol when he shattered a window with a stolen police riot shield. The case against the Proud Boys is one of 2 conspiracies charging members of far-right organizations with helping lead the assault on the Capitol. The other, against Rhodes and his Oath Keepers allies, levels charges of seditious conspiracy, the gravest allegations to date. Of course, we have a guilty plea on one of those. Tarrio will face a magistrate judge on Tuesday, today, to determine whether he will remain in custody pending trial. And I guess I hope he does. So that's some interesting news. Just, filling in that, once again, these idiots are filming themselves. I cannot, really grasp why they're doing that, but they are, and I guess I'm glad, because that way we can put more of them in jail. Now, there's more about Tarrio and what he's been up to. In addition to recording everything, he's also writing everything down. The New York Times has a story on another part, I think, of the same filing, I'm guessing. Document in January 6th case shows, not documentary, but document, shows plan to storm government buildings. That's beyond the Capitol. New details from evidence cited in the indictment of Enrique Tarrio, the former head of the far-right Proud Boys, reveal a plan with similarities to what unfolded at the Capitol. Alan Feuer, F-E-U-E-R, Alan Feur's name, I just don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, reports the following. A document found by federal prosecutors in the possession of far-right leader contained the far-right leader, a far-right leader? Yes, but it's Tarrio. Contained a detailed plan to surveil and storm government buildings around the Capitol on January 6th last year. People familiar with the document said on Monday. And I don't think they ever get around to telling us which buildings they're talking about. I was like, do they mean to go to the Department of Housing and Urban Development and capture the secretary? I mean, they're pro-Trump there. Or are they talking about the office buildings around the Capitol, the House and Senate office buildings on either side? I don't know. The document, titled 1776 Returns, ooh, they're so patriotic, was cited by prosecutors last week in charging the far-right leader, Enrique Tarrio, the former head of the Proud Boys extremist group, with conspiracy. The indictment of Mr. Tarrio described the document in general terms, but the people familiar with it added substantial new details about the scope and complexity of the plan it set out for directing an effort to occupy 6 House and Senate office buildings. There we go. And the Supreme Court last January 6th. I was surprised that the Supreme Court didn't come under attack. I guess they figured that's their side over there. But I mean, they're so close to the Capitol, right across the street from the Eastern Front, that I thought there'd be more people there. But they don't know what they're looking at. Remember, they broke into the Capitol and they were like, I don't know where the House is or which the Senate one. I don't know which place we're in. So they didn't know. They had to ask directions. I think there is actual film of people saying, asking the cops that they encounter inside which way to the House and which way to the Senate, like they were going to get help from them. But they didn't get arrested by those cops either. So I don't know. Anyway, the document does not specifically mention an attack on the Capitol building itself, but in targeting high-profile government buildings in the immediate area and the detailed timeline it set out, the plan closely resembles what actually unfolded when the Capitol was stormed by a pro-Trump mob intent on disrupting congressional certification of President Biden's Electoral College victory. Many questions remain about the document, including who wrote it and how it made its way to Mr. Tarrio, according to prosecutors. On December 30th, 2020, as President Trump was engaged in a series of overlapping schemes to keep himself in power. The people familiar with the document said other evidence the government has gathered suggested it may have been provided to Mr. Tarrio by one of his girlfriends at the time. Okay. Prosecutors have not accused Mr. Tarrio of using the document to guide the actions of the Proud Boys, who played a central role in the Capitol attack, nor did the charges against him offer any evidence that he shared the document with his 5 co-defendants, Ethan Nordine, Joseph Biggs, Zachary Real, Charles Donahue, and Dominic Pezzola. And we don't know whether he's Petzola or not anyway, but who cares? But the document could help explain why prosecutors chose to charge Mr. Tarrio with conspiracy. even though he was not at the Capitol during the attack. And it appears to be the first time that prosecutors have sought to use evidence of a specific written plan to storm and occupy government buildings in their wide-ranging investigation into the attack and what led up to it. Tarrio's lawyer, Naib Hassan, declined to comment. Broken into 5 parts, this report or this document is: infiltrate, execution, probably not the really bad kind of execution that they're talking about here, but executing the plan. But you never know. I mean, why not go and make them prove that it wasn't a plan to execute Nancy Pelosi and others? Infiltrate, execution, distract, occupy, and sit in. The 9-page document, 5 parts, 9 pages, recommends recruiting at least 50 people to enter each of the 7 government buildings and advises protesters to appear unsuspecting. That would be unsuspicious, I guess, or inconspicuous in English. But unsuspecting is when the person doesn't suspect others of doing something wrong. But, these guys are not great with English. And to, quote, not look tactical, because tactical to them means don't dress up in cool stuff. The people familiar with it said. You have to speak the language that they speak in order to give them their instructions. After ensuring that crowds at the buildings are full and ready to go, the document suggests that leads and seconds should enter and open doors for others to go in, causing trouble to distract security guards if necessary, like punching the security guards. Should the crowds fail to gain entrance to the buildings quickly, the document suggests pulling fire alarms at nearby stores, hotels, and museums to further distract guards or the police, the people said. It then says protesters should occupy the buildings and conduct sit-ins, even recommending slogans for people to chant, like "We the People" and "No Trump, No America." Very catchy. The document also makes suggestions for the days leading up to January 6th, advising protesters to, quote, scope out road closures near the 7 target buildings. On the morning of the protest, they added the document suggests having scouts, quote, scouts, everything that when I raise my voice like that, that's this quotes, having scouts drive around the buildings to look for roadblocks. There it is again. While much of the document is marked for internal use, okay, it's not a topical ointment, okay, for internal use. What internal to what? Okay. But that's very interesting, because that actually, to me, that's actually better, more solid evidence of conspiracy. And I hope the prosecutors realize that it's marked for internal use, meant to be kept secret, but meant in particular to be circulated within a known group of people. That's what would make it internal. I hope they'll use that at trial. The people said it contains a section known as the Patriot Plan that appears to have been meant for public distribution. This part of the document suggests that crowds begin to gather at the 7 buildings at 1 p.m. on January 6th. The people familiar with it said 30 minutes later, the public part of the plan calls for the crowds to await a signal from lead and then to storm the buildings. The indictment of Mr. Tarrio, who recently stepped down as chairman of the Proud Boys, was a significant development in the Justice Department's sprawling investigation of the Capitol attack, and the second time in recent months that charges had been brought against the leader of an extremist group that played a prominent role in the assault, the other one being Stuart Rhodes back in January. Altogether, more than 30 Proud Boys have been charged so far in connection with the attack, and many more took part in it but have not been charged. Members of the group, who have long served as vocal and often violent advocates for Mr. Trump, were instrumental in several key moments in the riot, including one at the Capitol's security perimeter that resulted in the first breach of the barricades. Prosecutors are still investigating the group. In court papers filed last week, they said they had recently carried out search warrants in the homes in North Carolina and central Pennsylvania of 2 top members of the group, later identified as Jeremy Bertino and John C. Stewart, according to people familiar with the matter. Unlike many of his subordinates, Tarrio was not in Washington on January 6th, having been arrested 2 days earlier for vandalizing a Black Lives Matter banner at a black church in the city after a pro-Trump rally in December of 2020 that spiraled into violence after nightfall. Charged with the second crime, the possession of 2 high-capacity rifle magazines, he was ordered to leave Washington by a local judge as part of his release agreement. And he complied. I'm surprised by that. But federal prosecutors said in their indictment that although Tarrio was not accused of physically taking part in the breach in the Capitol, he nonetheless led the advanced planning and remained in contact with other members of the Proud Boys during the storming of the building. Prosecutors have claimed, for example, that Mr. Tarrio issued orders before the attack for members of the group to leave behind their traditional black and yellow polo shirts and remain, quote, incognito, there, that one is actually used correctly, when they arrived in Washington. In the days leading up to the attack, Tarrio also took part in private Telegram group chats with other Proud Boys called the Ministry of Self-Defense and appeared to watch from a distance as several leaders and members of the group stormed the Capitol, prosecutors said. Arrested last Tuesday in his hometown of Miami, Tarrio is expected to appear in court there on Tuesday for a hearing to determine his bail. On Monday, prosecutors released court papers recommending that he remain in custody and arguing that he encouraged his compatriots to press on even as they broke into the Capitol. Proud of my boys and my country, Tarrio posted on social media not long after lawmakers were chased from the building, delaying the final certification of the presidential election. Around the same time, prosecutors said a member of the Proud Boys posted a message in an encrypted chat asking, "Are we a militia yet?" Mr. Tarrio responded with a one-word voice note, prosecutors said, and it was, "Yep." So I guess that's conclusive in terms of what he thought he was doing, and I love the fact that they marked it for internal use. I do hope that that comes up in the proceedings today. All right, time almost now for another break, so we'll take one at the top of the hour just for a minute. We got another one or two longer form stories to share with you. We could squeeze this one in. This is an interesting thing I saw on Twitter from The Hill yesterday. I don't know how much success they're going to have with this one. I guess there's some issues with it. But anyway, Politico apparently has demanded that Senator Josh Hawley stop using that famous, now infamous, January 6th photo of him giving the raised fist salute to the crowds outside the Capitol on January 6th for his campaign merchandise. He's selling a coffee mug and probably other things of that photo, totally unashamed of it. But of course, Politico's photographer probably says, hey, we own the rights to that. Maybe we should stop him from using it. We'll see how they do with that. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's go. Next time, we got another segment to run through here. Oh, you know what? I have a note in front of me. Might as well catch up on this one. I forgot to put the date down on this one. But as you know, we like to occasionally remember to actually welcome new contributors to the show, whether they come in through Patreon or the other methods that we take. Let's see, the Cash app we use from Square. And I still use PayPal from time to time. Sometimes things come in that way. But via Patreon, this was a fun one. New contributor, Mark Hamill. Now, I don't know whether or not this is the Mark Hamill that we all know of when we talk about Mark Hamill. And I doubt it. And probably, poor guy has been walking around his whole life saying, no, not that Mark Hamill. But maybe it is. I don't know. It doesn't say anything like, yes, this is really Mark Hamill. But at any rate, welcome to Mark Hamill, whether you're Luke Skywalker or another equally important and very friendly and helpful Mark Hamill. Appreciate your support as well. And you too can eventually get your name read on the air here in exchange for a couple of bucks. It's a terrific deal. People have spent money on dumber things. Call it a non-fungible token if you want. Just send a couple bucks a month to us via Patreon or some other recurring contribution service, or send lump sums in gold or diamonds, however you want to do it, and we'll do the same for you. How do you like that? Well, anyway, of course, it doesn't have to be that much. But if you do happen to have gold and diamonds to send, then by all means, go ahead. Bitcoin, I don't know. I don't own any. It might be an interesting novelty, but I haven't figured out how to eat it yet, so not sure. Anyway, thanks again to Mark for joining, and I'm sorry if I perpetuated a dumb joke that you've suffered with your whole life. Or if you are Mark Hamill, I'm sorry I did another thing that would probably be annoying to you. But in either case, do appreciate it. And now, in honor of Mark's contribution, I offer you this long read piece here. I have to dive into it and find out. And I guess if it turns out to be the county we've been talking about all along in this. Then we'll just credit ourselves with a job well done at having detected the news early. But if not, then it's another example of Republicans hard at work to undermine the very ability of Democrats to not only cast votes in our democracy, but be represented by the Democrats they then elect to office. The Washington Post piece reported yesterday by Stephanie McCrummen called "Gutted: What Happened When a Georgia Elections Office Was Targeted for Takeover by Those Who Claim the 2020 Election Was a Fraud." Now, we've made a stop down in Georgia before and watched the effects of a new-ish state law adopted by the Republican-controlled legislature there that allows the state basically to declare local counties that happen to be under Democratic control, because lots of Democrats live there and very few Republicans do, to declare them basically incompetent to carry out the task of administering elections there in the judgment of the state, and therefore begin purging the local elections boards and replacing them with loyal Republicans instead, who may, by virtue of the delegation of authority from the state legislature, decide to conduct elections, even though that's supposedly unconstitutional now, to conduct elections in ways that might include things like no Democrats are allowed to vote, or there won't be any polling stations in this county at all, anywhere, or we'll arrest you for giving people water, whatever it is. And we've read articles about it before, sounded the alarm, but this is another chance to sound the alarm again, that once again, this is not a what if story, it is a what now story, because it's actually happening. Where? In Rome, Georgia. Is that in the counties that we were talking about? I don't know. We'll find out probably if we read a little further. Now I'm not even sure I remember whether it will ring a bell, whether we're talking about the same counties or not. But anyway, let's go. The interim election supervisor took a seat all the way to one side of the meeting room, her back against the wood-paneled wall, a position near the police officers and a few steps from an exit. Knowing what was about to happen, Vanessa Waddell, I don't know how you would pronounce it. And we see this name from time to time, but it's a common last name. Vanessa Waddell raised her cell phone and began recording. She zoomed in on the county commissioners who were about to name a new election board, sweeping away a system based on civic-minded volunteers and mutual trust, and replacing it with one controlled by people claiming that fraud had corrupted the 2020 presidential election. She panned around the room, and here were the people who'd been pushing to oust the old system, believing that the corruption had seeped all the way down to their very own election office, casting Waddell as a pawn in a conspiracy stretching to China, like literally to all the way to China. And now she noticed someone new, a young man in grease-stained boots. Okay. And she wondered whether he might be the one who'd sent her an email that had read in part, "We'll make the Boston bombings." Are they talking about the Boston Marathon? Really? "We'll make the Boston bombings look like child's play at the poll sites in this county. You've been warned. We will end you all." And we should find these people and put them in wood chippers. The meeting was called to order, as if that was even a possible thing when everybody there is under death threat. "Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance," said one of the commissioners, and as they got down to approving each of the new members of the Floyd County Board of Elections, Floyd County, I think this is a different county, one of the more incremental revolution, one more incremental revolution, thank you, I'm glad I got that right, was underway in America, revealing how the norms and machinery of democracy are being upended more than a year after Donald Trump tried to overturn the results of the presidential election. So this is pulling the carpet out from underneath Brad Raffensperger is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is this is giving Brian Raffensperger what he... Raffensperger? Brad? Did I say Brian? I don't know. Giving him the tools that he needs or needed at the time to do for Donald Trump what he really wanted to do but didn't feel he could do. I think that's probably a more accurate reflection of what's going on here. In this case, the setting was a swath of northwest Georgia that was mostly white, mostly Republican, and known for its love of guns, church, and sending to Congress one of the most radicalized U.S. politicians in recent memory, Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was a place that until recently might have been dismissed as representing only the extremes of what politics could be in America, but now the extreme was becoming the norm. And the norm was what was happening under a patched-up rotunda in the wishfully named county seat of Rome. That's okay, whatever. Waddell, a 64-year-old black woman who'd been working in elections for 27 years and whose norm had become fearing for her own safety, continued recording. She watched as the final board member was approved and people cheered, and now she was shaking her head, imagining what would be coming next. The election office, where she'd worked since 1994, was one of more than 10,000 throughout the country, places that have often been forgotten except for on voting days, and that are now being targeted for takeover by a Republican Party enthralled to false claims that the 2020 presidential race was stolen. In Georgia, the effort is playing out through statewide legislation and more surgically through a patchwork of new county-specific laws. The measures are targeting rural counties that have long been majority white GOP strongholds, where people running elections have often come from Democratic and black communities, a legacy of the civil rights struggle in the rural South. This status quo is being dismantled, with the common goal being tighter Republican control. See, I guess here in this case we're talking about a county that is Republican and that does in fact vote Republican almost always, but in which I guess what they're saying here is that back in the more active civil rights campaign days, the encouragement of, well, why don't black folks volunteer for these positions? Because in most cases, we're not talking about an elected county board in Georgia. In some states, they are elected directly. But at any rate, the idea, I think, was to get black folks out there to maintain these offices and run these offices so that the few black people in the area would have their rights to vote protected as best they could be. And in some of these cases, like here in Floyd County, they probably figured, well, the balloting is still going to be overwhelmingly Republican. So long as the black folks running the board don't try to pretend that Democrats somehow carried the county, as long as they're counting honestly about what's going on, we don't mind if they administer the elections, even if the price is having to allow black people to vote. I'm sure, that probably goes through a few Georgian minds from here and there. But they were able to, I guess, say, all right, well, we'll give them that. And I don't think there was any change in how the election came out in Floyd County either. A lot of the places where they were doing this initially in Georgia are places that I guess I should say, this is one of a number of stories that we've seen where Republicans won overwhelmingly, but they were so caught up in the national call for, what did they call them? Forensic audits, that they're calling for forensic audits even where Trump won overwhelmingly. And I guess they justify that by saying, well, he would have won even more overwhelmingly in this county. All right, so Rome and Floyd County is one of these places where it was overwhelmingly white and Republican, but the local folks running the election office turned out to be black. So they said, well, it hasn't changed the outcome of the elections, but why not fire everybody here and blame them for losing the national election? All right. Since the 2020 election, the state's GOP legislators have introduced 14 bills reorganizing county election boards that oversee election offices. So far, 8 bills have been signed into law, resulting in a purge of longtime election board members, an exodus of election staffers, and the installation of Republicans who have proposed measures to reduce poll locations and cancel Sunday voting. In the case of Floyd County, the result was the abrupt dissolution of the nonpartisan election board that had been in place for decades. The county is in the geographic middle of northwest Georgia's 14th congressional district, an area long dominated by the Republican Party, written off by national Democrats, and stretching from the Appalachian foothills along the Tennessee line to the outermost fringes of Atlanta's exurban sprawl. In between are two-lane roads, farms, and passed-down family compounds, decayed mill towns, and the world hub of carpet manufacturing. Billboards for accident attorneys and eternal salvation. Gun stores and gun clubs, and all over these days, flags flying. Not just old faded Trump flags, but fresh ones hoisted from porches and pickups, creases still visible. Bright red signs for Green, who's up for re-election, are again lining roadsides, along with those of other candidates who speak in her same alarmist tones about domestic enemies in America. Within that landscape, Rome has always stood somewhat apart, with a Republican majority that has traditionally been more country club than gun club. It is home to the area's largest concentration of Democrats, as well as old money families, bankers, lawyers, and doctors, including the brain surgeon who ran against Green in the 2020 GOP primary and lost everywhere except Rome and surrounding Floyd County. Trump won the county twice with roughly 70% of the vote, and in the final days of his 2020 campaign, he had flown to Rome for one of his last rallies, drawing some 30,000 people to the municipal airport. At the time, Waddell was not yet the interim election supervisor. She worked in voter registration, one of 5 employees in an office that was in the basement of the same old yellow brick building where the commissioners held public meetings on the top floor. It was down a dim stairwell with crumbling walls at the end of a long hallway and behind a plexiglass reception window. The office had always been thinly staffed and cramped, with plastic trays of voter registration cards piled on top of overfilled filing cabinets. It was overseen by an election board comprising citizens who'd answered a county ad for volunteers, filled out a form, and might have been assigned to parks, but got elections instead. The operation was known for being slow on election nights and at times disorganized, problems that had been a matter of eye-rolling until 2020, when Trump began predicting a rigged election and his followers began seeing every mishap as suspicious. Then came Election Day and the statewide recount that followed, when Floyd County made national news for failing to tally roughly 2,600 votes. State election officials described the incident as an amazing blunder, the result of failing to upload a memory card, and called on the election supervisor to resign. Meanwhile, Trump capitalized on the mistake, tweeting out a video of workers carrying cardboard boxes and the words "Floyd County, Georgia" in all caps with an exclamation point that was viewed more than 7 million times. By December, the election supervisor was gone, and the nonpartisan board, still in power at that point, named Waddell to the job on an interim basis, with the immediate task of getting the country ready for a special election for U.S. Senate, being held January 5th amid a degenerating atmosphere. You remember that one. There were fights between Republican and Democratic volunteers that got so bad that police had to escort ballots from drop boxes back to the office. The election staff had to field roughly 200 voter eligibility challenges, none of which turned out to be valid. Interesting. Part of more than 364,000 filed across the state by an organization seeking to disqualify voters. There were harassing phone calls to the staff. The low point was the email Waddell received referring to the Boston bombings. This country was founded on righteous war, and if this is what is required of us to defend our very democracy, we will step forward, it had continued. Anyone at the poll site is worthy of our wrath. Detonations will occur at every polling site set up in this county. They didn't, but Waddell had notified the police and carried on. On Election Day, the results were delivered on time with no discrepancies, and by the way, no detonations. The next day, she watched on her computer as thousands of people stormed the U.S. Capitol, including some from her part of Georgia, and she wondered what they might do once they were back. But a few months later, when the election board offered to make her interim title permanent, she figured the worst was over. I was excited, she said. I was glad to accept the position. She remembered feeling confident as she headed upstairs to the meeting room, expecting the county commissioners would keep tradition and approve her. That's what I thought would happen, she said. Now, it was 7 months later, January 2022, and Waddell was in the basement office, still the interim supervisor, still not approved, beginning another day in the unsettling limbo that her life had become. Piled on her desk were hundreds of requests for records that had been pouring into the office for months. Handwritten ones from locals and formal ones from well-funded national groups, such as True the Vote, that sought to prove fraud. Pursuant to Georgia Open Records Act, I would like to obtain, they all began, each one seeming to Waddell more obsessive than the last. Numbered lists of voters voting in each precinct. All videotaping of all ballot drop boxes, all oaths from 2015 to current date for all election board members, chairs, chiefs, and superintendents in previous or current positions. Prior approval of SOS, State Secretary of State, modifications of scanners. Waddell opened another email. What now? She said, recognizing the name of a frequent requester. They're wanting copies of those tabulation tapes, said her colleague, Shirley Mosley, who'd worked in the office for 4 years. Tabulation tapes, said Patricia Sperlin, who'd been there for 2. And our poll books, Waddell said, for every precinct. Any thought they had that the atmosphere might calm down was gone. What amounted to a grassroots uprising had gained momentum, become more organized, and started coming after the election office. New people had been showing up for the county commission meetings, not the old guard Floyd County Republicans, but the Green Wing that had all but taken over the party. They accused the election board of being corrupt and controlled by Democrats. They unearthed a private photo of the election board chairwoman holding a Trump mug in one hand and raising a middle finger in the other, blew it up to poster size and displayed it in a meeting as evidence that she was biased. Although I would say, oh yeah, she's pro-Trump, unless she's giving the finger to the mug. Anyway, they demanded a state review of the election office, and when nothing happened, one of them contacted the owner of a bus plastered with photos of Trump and the words, "Ready for round 3, 2021, who drove it to Rome, parking outside the yellow brick building in a show of force. Rawr. Increasingly, they zeroed in on Waddell. Any background checks done on Vanessa Waddell? Read an open records request. Any and all available job applications for Vanessa Waddell? Read another. She listened as a man claimed she had committed more than 150 violations related to the January 5th Senate election. She sat there as others questioned whether her high school diploma was fake and whether her college degree was legitimate. A man said that he was, quote, disgusted by her handling of the election. A woman complained that she had been staring at her during meetings. I began to be concerned about her intent, the woman told the commissioners. I asked 2 individuals to keep an eye on the situation. Then one morning, 3 people who'd been among the most vocal at the meetings showed up at the plexiglass window of the election office. One of them began taking a cell phone video. The 2 others went down the hallway to a small room where the voting equipment was stored, wedged open the door, and took more videos as Sperlin, terrified, told them that they had to leave. Waddell alerted county officials, who called the police, who showed up after the 3 were gone, took a report, and told her there was nothing else they could do. After that, the office in the basement had felt like a bunker. Sperlin began carrying pepper spray. Mosley bought a stun gun and began checking the hands of people who showed up at the plexiglass window. Waddell considered bringing her gun to work. When she went upstairs for the meetings, she began sitting against the wall for security, thinking that she'd eventually hear some sort of reassurance from the county commissioners. But on a Tuesday in November, what she heard was that the governor had signed a bill remaking election administration in Floyd County. Instead of a 3-member nonpartisan board, she would now have to answer to a new 5-member board that was explicitly partisan. 2 Democrats, 3 Republicans, including one she recognized as a leading critic of her office, and 2 others she worried held the same views. By the end of the month, the old election board was dissolved. 2 weeks after that, the county commission unanimously approved the new board. And after that, county officials told Waddell, with little explanation, that she would be reverting to her old job in voter registration. It was unclear whether anyone in the election office would have jobs once the new board was sworn in, because They'd all have to reapply. The word they kept hearing was gutted. That's what somebody upstairs said. Mosley was saying the whole office needs to be gutted. She was packing up vote here signs and old coffee pots because on top of everything else, they've been told that they were moving to a new office in a corner of the county health department on the edge of town, a space that, as far as they could tell, was smaller than where they were now. You can stack those over here, Sperlin said. Waddell hunched over her desk, glasses on her nose, trying to focus on preparing for upcoming primaries, even though that wasn't really her job anymore. Someone needed to order paper for the ballots. Someone needed to sort through the redistricting changes. She started writing out a list of affected addresses. It's okay, she said to herself, and soon the hour got late, and it was around this time that a woman showed up in a small parking lot behind the building, at the end of which stood a stained dumpster. The woman climbed inside. In the darkness of a cold night, she gathered armfuls of shredded paper into a garbage bag, then climbed out, explaining later that she had heard the election office was destroying documents and that she was determined to piece them all together again. Inside the building, Waddell got a new email. It was from one of the people who'd barged into the office, a man who had filed more open records requests than anyone else and whose persistence had worried her so much that she had tried unsuccessfully to get a restraining order against him. There are no images on scanner 530 and 550, his latest email read. What the hell is he talking about, she said. My God. The Blue Jays are upset about it in the background, too. He was Mark Swanson, this guy was, 55, a bank consultant, an evangelical Christian, a member of the Optimist Club, not really, and a low-key Trump supporter until the night of the 2020 election when he watched a Fox News announcer call Arizona for Joe Biden relatively early. The first thing that made me think, that was the first thing that made me think, he said, ever in his life probably, describing himself as someone who was, quote, always interested in what's going on in the world, who loves to learn, loves to read, but who was not an activist until that moment. Sitting at his kitchen table one afternoon, he began describing how it all snowballed from there. How his Facebook feed began filling with stories of alleged fraud from Arizona to Georgia and, one day, his hometown election office. How he'd come to see not human error, but what he called strategic incompetence. How he'd learned to file open records requests and had obtained hundreds of documents that he was posting to his Facebook page, and with red underlines and stars and headings such as The Recruiter and The End Run. How he'd come to see Democrats and Republicans as partners in a global network of corruption that was intertwined with China and whose end game was world domination. How he had recently come up with a name for those involved. Stabs, he said. Subversive, tyrannical, authoritarian bureaucrats. Perfect. Yeah, that's so good. The former Vice President Mike Pence was probably a stab, he said. The governor? Stab. Secretary of State? Stab. The county commissioners? Stabs. Waddell? I don't know that she's a stab. I think she's a pawn, definitely, said Swanson, who saw himself as part of a revolution of ordinary people. I believe God put me on this earth to do this, which makes you really rather extraordinary, but okay. Every time I want to give up, God shines a light on one more piece of information. Oh boy. He had been showing up to the county commission meetings, becoming a leading critic of the election office. He met with the county commissioners, he met with state legislators, and now his closest ally, whom he referred to as his investigative partner, was on the new election board. That was Pam Peters, a retired music teacher, who shared Swanson's conviction that, quote, there was cheating at many levels at several places during the election, and that you've got to get off the couch and do something. She had led the local Republican Party's effort to recruit and train dozens of new poll watchers for the 2020 election and helped Swanson in his efforts to expose corruption after that. When the party's executive committee asked her to be on the election board, she decided, I am called to do this, and accepted. What she wanted to do now, she said, was a review of the elections office. She wanted to go through files and clean house, she said. She wanted a new election supervisor who could hire new staffers. There's so much to do. It's overwhelming, she said, and I'm sure that it was. The second new Republican on the board was Gary Stamper, a mechanical engineer who carried a fresh notebook with questions he wanted answered about the 2020 vote. He wanted to know whether it was true that there had been mail-in ballots that were never folded, which was supposedly a sign of fraud. He wanted to know whether voting equipment could be rigged to deliver a predetermined result. That is part of why I'm here, he said. For my little quiet corner of Northeast Georgia, can we put together a process that is beyond reproach? Well, not anymore. We'll be right back.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue. Pardon me. Let's continue with the story if we can. Although I do want to shoehorn something else in here. Now I don't know what's going on today. Maybe there we go. Joan just delayed just a little bit, but I did want to shoehorn in a mention of the story since I won't go on with the Georgia story. But you're certainly getting the idea of the minutia of the story and how depressing it really is. But I also throw out there an update that I neglected to mention the other day. Tina Peters, the Mesa County, Colorado clerk, who recently got herself in trouble, or I guess now a while ago, got herself in trouble breaking into the storage facility where they kept the voting machines, etc. I guess about a week ago now, finally got indicted in that security breach, along with another of her aides there. So there's actual charges pending here. But again, just a reminder that these are no longer what if stories, they are what now stories. This is already happening, purging out elections infrastructure in places that they don't even need it. But of course, I guess eventually they'll get around to places that are more swingy and that might make a bit more of a difference. And that honestly, when the time comes, if they're able to take over these places and skew the results in some way, depending on how they do it, if it's a matter of just closing the right polling places or disallowing Sunday voting or getting rid of drop boxes, etc., it won't look very much different. It'll look to all outward appearances and most importantly to the news media like, well, I don't know why it happened this way, but the country that overwhelmingly rejected Donald Trump last time has just overwhelmingly welcomed him back, even in the wake of his having been historically wrong on Vladimir Putin and having been proved more corrupt than anyone in the history of the United States. But to all outward appearances, all the people with the right neckties and official stamps say it happened. And ironically, in some weird way, we should just point out that there are 330 million people in this country, and Donald Trump got 567 million votes. So, but I don't know. It says officially here that that's what the numbers are, and we won't look into it any further than that. Because it's official. It has the stamp on it and everything. You know, just like how would it have gone if Brad Raffensperger had said, I can find you that 11,000 votes. and had done it. I don't know what the outcome would have been. It was very different, except that Trump would be, well, the difference would be Trump would be president and there'd be no investigation of it. But if it somehow leaked out that, yes, and even if Raffensperger said, yeah, I made up those 11,000 votes, I do sometimes wonder, what do they do? You know, this is outrageous. Yes, it is. Yeah, well, we should charge him with something. Well, we can't get anybody to charge him with anything. And you know the whole sitting president thing. Still unanswered questions about what the hell you would do in a situation like that. I think the founders said hang the guy, but you know, it was different back then. So, I don't know. Somehow they were allowed to do that. I don't think they really were, but I don't know. Something tar, feathers, I don't know. People left. It just wasn't done. I know that much. Because people had honor and yada yada. You know, remember the whole thing. Sacred honor. That whole bit. Well, whatever. Anyway, Joan is here. We should switch gears or continue with this at her discretion. Good morning, Joan. How are you? Thank you for your patience. Sorry.
Good morning. I don't know. I don't know what to talk about. So, yes, we can continue talking about that. We can talk about Rand Paul. We can talk about Zelensky coming. We can talk about anything you want to.
Is Zelensky coming? I didn't know whether he was...
Well, he's not.
Oh, okay. All right.
Zelensky speaking to Congress via big Zoom call? I'm not sure what you would call it.
We're not supposed to tell for strategic reasons what service he's using. I don't know. Maybe Marco Rubio will go hunting for him and probably give out his IP address during the speech. But okay, so he's going to do a remote appearance of some kind, and they'll put him on a big screen or something.
Yes, and it's also apparently they figured out security issues because it's also going to be live streamed, so that people besides people in Congress can see it. Apparently, that's what AP is reporting.
That's nice. I'd like to be able to see it, I guess.
That's tomorrow, 9 o'clock Eastern.
Oh, well, that's the answer to that. I'm busy, but okay.
You could live stream it on your show.
Yeah, I guess. We could do that. All right, why not? Instead of me, we'll have him. Okay. Well, that's certainly of some interest. What did Rand Paul do? You mentioned him, and I'm worried.
Rand has forced a vote today in the Senate on no masks on public transportation or airplanes.
Oh, okay.
Because he's Rand Paul, and he feels abused every time he has to get on an airplane if somebody asks him to put on a mask.
Why doesn't
As opposed to Ted Cruz, who gets hugged every time he gets on an airplane by flight attendants who are so pleased that he is fighting for them not to have to wear masks.
Well, one of them's wrong about what happens. At least.
How Rand managed to get a vote on this, I am not sure. Probably just by being annoying.
I guess. I don't know. There must be something we need to get to, and I'm going to filibuster or something unless you give me this. And all right, well,
I would assume so.
Why doesn't he just buy his own plane?
It's not going to even show up in the House, so why we're doing this? Because Rand Paul.
Yeah.
Rand Paul is also
the
only person not to sign on to a sense of the Senate resolution from Lindsey Graham that says Putin should be investigated for war crimes.
Okay.
He has some changes he wants made.
Oh. Do you know what they are?
No.
Okay. Neither does he. Yeah, sure. But, okay, I'm just curious, like, sometimes, occasionally, you know, he zeroes in on a point somewhere and we don't like the way he goes about making it or asking for its consideration. But I don't know. Maybe that's not
well, in fact, yesterday he did a good thing. Because he's Rand Paul and he just drives you nuts by occasionally showing up and being good. The only Republican not to sign on to a letter to Biden saying stop the negotiations with Iran on restarting the nuclear deal.
Okay.
Because he says the negotiations haven't even started. It's really stupid to try to stop them before they've started, and you're being dumb. And he was right. And I hate it when Rand Paul is right because so often Rand Paul is Rand Paul.
Yeah, well, you know, so that's fine to say, all right, well, this thing makes sense that he did, and we'll concentrate on the things that don't make sense when they happen. That's fine. it's good. It's nice to know that they're not completely bonkers all the time, I guess. But it is a little confounding. He's a bit of an oddball, and and he doesn't like masks, so big deal. Okay, well, he's going to get that vote, but not in the House, although Marjorie Taylor Greene would love to have it, because I understand she now claims she's lost her entire congressional salary to fines for refusing to wear masks during the time that they were mandated.
That's what she's saying.
Yeah, which, okay. I don't know why that's bad.
She and, who was it?
Right, an unknown dude.
Types like her had sued, had gone to court, to federal court, to say, this isn't fair, we shouldn't have to do this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, and Ralph Norman. You don't often hear much about Ralph Norman.
No.
Which sounds like that's okay.
Yeah, he's doing good.
Anyway, they brought a lawsuit against Pelosi, presumably trying to get their fines for refusing to wear masks revoked and get their money back. And a federal judge has said,
okay,
and tossed it. So
good. No, that's how it ought to be. And she doesn't need the money anyway, so forget it. And all you have to do is put on the mask and get your money. No, okay. All right, not that hard.
Yep.
So, okay. Man.
We've got, I think it's 4 more COVID cases in Congress.
Oh?
All Democratic women.
Oh.
DeLauro. I don't remember. Maggie Hassan and 2 other Democratic members in the House.
Okay.
So,
that's too bad.
Still with us.
Yeah. Barack Obama, too.
Barack Obama.
Not in Congress.
All of them vaxxed and experiencing just minor symptoms, but
good.
All of them positive.
Best you can help for. So it's still out there and lingering, and in very different fashion elsewhere. Abroad, they're having gigantic spikes again, and usually, and some of them in places that we tend to get them after they have spikes, and then some in places that had never spiked at all. South Korea having a terrific problem.
I don't know which vaccine they're using. We had a bit of a discussion with us in our group Slack.
Okay.
And Mark, who's our resident expert and who I trust, says that we don't need to be panicking yet about China. Because its vaccine, Sinovac, is much less effective than any of the U.S. vaccines.
Oh, so we don't need to think
in
that
China,
it might come
in
and
Hong
get
Kong,
us. I see.
And in Asia, he says most of the big spikes seem to be Omicron just overwhelming the testing isolation protocols that were sufficient up until that point, and with Sinovac not being as effective of a vaccine.
Okay.
So he says, we are also seeing a second spike in Europe that is so far lower than that of BA1 Omicron, the first Omicron.
Okay.
So he says, it bears watching, but right now I'm not panicking.
Okay.
I think generally,
any excuse to not panic.
I trust Mark.
Sure.
If Mark says we don't need to panic yet, we don't need to panic yet.
Yeah. Now, a separate question, if you want to panic, is what it means for those of us here, not in terms of whether we will see a similar spike after it migrates here from China, but they are closing down vast swaths of China and closing a lot of the factories again. So we're in for another supply chain shock.
Right,
like.
And one of the big port cities is closed.
Yeah. So, they're pretty tough on that over there. So, and they, I don't think they care a great deal about the disruptions to others. They have their own program in mind, and they don't worry the same way we do. Like, well, what about the economy? Because,
right,
it's not.
And
their
if it's
economy.
our economy that's
right
getting the hit, they really don't care.
Yeah.
So
well, keeping an eye on that.
we could see more supply chain issues coming. That could be bad news for inflation again.
So keep an eye on it. Not that inflation has anything to do with anything, because over on the oil price side of things, I understand oil prices way down, and yet gas prices not seemingly linked to the drop in oil prices, only to the rises.
Isn't that strange?
That is amazing. Those oil and gas guys, I can't tell what's going on.
We are seeing a move among some, I don't know if we call them powerful members of Congress, some loud members of Congress, some effective members of Congress to have a windfall profits tax for oil and gas companies.
That's a throwback of a term.
Yeah,
that's really something.
But an appropriate throwback, I think, a good time to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. There's really, because, even for people who are into free market stuff, it's not like these guys they're not making more profits like this because of how smart they are, or even how much foresight they had. They were already in the oil and gas business. No genius happened here. So can't we just say several $1 billion in your pocket is pretty good compensation, and you didn't do anything extra? It was all external to your efforts that you're making these windfall profits. Can't we have some
with the lockdown, they've had record profits for the past 7 years. Every year for the past 7 years have been record profits for them. Yeah, they can afford this. So, and it would be a good time to get Republicans sort of behind the put your vote where your mouth is on rising gas prices.
Yeah, that's true. And
I would like to see Democrats doing everything they could right now to maximize pressure on Republicans when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, specifically Russia.
Well, I think that's a great revival of an old term. A lot of people won't know what it means, and that does sometimes lead to problems, like with no-fly zones, for instance.
Yes.
But now it's a good time to learn about windfall profits. I don't think we've heard those mentioned, a windfall profit tax, I don't know, since the 80s, I guess.
Has it been that long?
It feels that way. I think that maybe it's not, but there was certainly a time in which, it was just unfashionable to even define anything as a windfall profit. Everybody was a genius if they managed to get profits. And I guess it's still only special circumstances. I've never even heard of it actually applied outside of the oil and gas industry.
No.
But that tells you something. They have their own kind of profits. It's a whole
and they're
category.
particularly good at exploiting crises.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, that does happen. And, it'd be very exciting to see them talk about it again. And a good way to get them, at the very least, I guess you could get them to lower their prices if the idea catches on and they just say, well, if we lower our prices again, then there won't be very much in the way of windfall profit for you to tax, and it will go away. That will work. You are free to try that, guys.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
If you'd like to get
I think it would be a really smart way to try to force down gas prices, since, as we have seen, it's not like they're having to spend a whole lot more for oil to refine that gas.
No,
so
it's less, in fact.
I mean, maybe there are some supply issues getting it here to refineries, but I don't think so.
Yeah, then give the windfall profits to the guys driving the oil tankers.
Now I think would be a very good time for Democrats to go on offense on a lot of things. Use the popularity of Zelensky. Use the scrappiness of Ukraine. Use this moment of sort of national unity behind Ukraine, except for Fox News.
Yes.
To really put some pressure on Republicans and do things like pass anti-corruption legislation that would keep Russian money out of political campaigns in the U.S.
Yes, that'd be nice.
Do a lot of things that are going to make Republicans uncomfortable and make them have to vote.
Yeah.
This is what I would like to see from Democrats right now. I don't know that we're going to get it, but we can ask.
Well, they're no longer distracted by having to pass CRs, so we got the time.
Actually, we are
technically
running on a CR until, I think, tomorrow.
Oh, I thought, okay. Well, that's not so good. Then I was under the impression that maybe I heard in discussion, maybe I heard wrong with Greg. I thought they had passed another one and they just said, you know what?
They did, but they passed the omnibus.
Okay.
They passed the smaller CR. Biden hasn't signed the omnibus yet. We're functioning under the CR because there were some technical changes that needed to be made in the omnibus.
You can't ever get it right. I thought they had just said, all right, we're doing it all the way to September. And maybe I'm wrong, but I guess that would be the omnibus. But okay.
Yes,
so
the omnibus does
cool,
go through September.
Again. All right.
So half
this is correct.
A little more than half of a year is paid for.
All right. That's good. Any bumps up and things?
I don't know that they're working at all on the 12 appropriations bills that we would like to have ready in October to pass.
Yeah, right. Maybe now's the time.
Because they just got through with last year, essentially. This year being last year.
There's always work to do in Congress?
There's always work to do on the budget.
When do they get a chance to relax around there? Gee whiz.
So, no, we're not going to have all 12 appropriations bills done in time for the next fiscal year, which starts October 1, because that's a month before the midterm election. The Republicans just aren't going to let that happen. So, starting October 1, we're going to be back on continuing resolution time.
Huzzah.
But at least it's a budget that is a Biden compromise budget rather than a Trump budget. And that helps.
Maybe that will make a difference. I wonder how long it's been since when was the last time all appropriations bills were passed on time? I don't really know.
I don't think in the time that I've been writing about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it predates Daily Kos generally.
I think it predates Daily Kos, yeah.
Okay, so that's like 2003. So.
I mean, there have always been continuing resolutions.
Yeah.
Always.
That's
not
true.
always.
I mean,
for like
existed.
the last 25 years, maybe even 30 years. There's always, almost every year, there's been a continuing resolution to just, make up that gap.
Yeah,
but
to deal with at least
it's
one or
only
two.
been in the last 10, where the bulk of the time the government is operating, it is under a continuing resolution.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a tool they've had for a while, and they've used it to patch holes. Oh, we haven't finished 2 of the 12 annual appropriations bills yet, but we're going to finish soon, so to avoid a partial government shutdown, they'll have a CR. And then it grew into, we haven't finished any of them, but we're going to, but not for another 2 months, so they'll pass the CR. And now it's like, we didn't even start. I don't know, just CR. Do the whole year this way. But
I don't know that we've seen a 2023 budget from the White House.
Oh. Well,
usually that comes with the State of the Union.
Yeah, that's usually a February kind of a thing.
And I don't think we have it.
Well, that's not good. That'll give them something to point to and say, well, that's his fault. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it is, and I don't know why that's not happened, but I'll look around, see if I can figure it out.
I will too, now that I'm thinking about it. Because... it didn't occur to me, although, I've been trained to say, I remember when I worked for Wyden, and during the State of the Union, we would get that great, big, huge, thick budget the day of the State of the Union, usually about 2 hours before. And our job was to go through page by page by page to find all of the things that could be good for Oregon. Okay. So that by the end of the State of the Union, we would have the list for Ron to talk about.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it would usually work. It's a lot of pages, and you would get it about that time. And I should have noticed that the usual quotes weren't circulating. I'm like, boy, it's already March, and no one has said the president's budget is dead on arrival. You're supposed to say that every time.
You're supposed to say that, yes, when you're the opposition party.
It's dead on arrival. Even in your party. Like, you say, that budget is dead on arrival. Charlie Rangel used to say that all the time, even about Democratic budgets.
Yes.
Dead on arrival. Because he was going
to
rewrite
And then Nancy Pelosi's show me your budget and you show me your values or whatever it is. Right. Something along those lines.
And, and in those days there were more budgets being offered than there... Back in the days when they offered more alternative budgets than they offered rebuttals to the State of the Union. In my day, people were more interested in that. But however, now... everybody can have a YouTube channel, so I suppose anybody
Paul Ryan might have broken that habit.
Yeah?
Just through ineptitude. Remember the famous Paul and Ryan budget that was like a series of circles linked by straight lines? That
I remember
he had his
fiddling around
big
with that
budget
stuff.
plan, and everything was just this sort of strange bunch of charts that didn't really work.
Certainly rings a bell, but yeah, I can't piece together any detail
Our
from
old
it because there
friend
may
Jake.
never have been any.
Trapper John,
Yeah.
Jake, did just a hilarious diary on that. I'll find the link for you.
That would be fun.
Share.
That's some old history. But yeah, I do remember that Paul Ryan, came in as I'm a budget wonk. That's why I'm here. I can't wait to do a budget. And then it fell to him to do the budget, and as I recall,
And
we
it
got
was
garbage.
very silly.
What? I don't. It didn't make any sense. And numbers were backwards and upside down. And what else did he want? He wanted some sort of. Was that where? That wasn't where it came from. But he resurrected dynamic scoring.
Yes, he did.
I remember that stuff now.
Yeah.
Boy, I feel old like that. Windfall profits, dynamic scoring,
We are
scam.
old, Kagro.
Yeah, I'm gonna yell at a cloud when I'm done here. Boy. Well, that does bring us back. But all right, so we've got more work to do. Joe Manchin is a jerk. We talked about that earlier in the show.
Joe Manchin is a jerk. I've really got to. Raskin has been unanimously approved for everything she's come before the Senate before.
That is,
I mean,
I heard,
Federal Reserve, something in Treasury, sure, unanimous approval because she's brilliant
at what she does. Yeah, okay, brilliant. It's okay. And now,
and now she said something about fossil fuels once, and so no. And also, this is my supposition, and it's more of a secret problem Republicans have with her. She's married to Jamie Raskin.
That would be a bigger problem for them.
Yeah,
yes.
the last House impeachment manager.
Yeah. I thought
former guy.
that might bother them a little bit more than anything else, but
particularly since in the position that she has been nominated for, she really isn't going to be making any kind of policy about fossil fuels.
Yeah, unlikely. Everything is a little bit connected somewhere, but yeah, nothing direct. It's not the energy department. It's okay, but yeah, they're probably just mad at Raskin.
I'm sure this is Joe Manchin just being Joe Manchin, being in a position to throw his weight around, so he's doing it.
Yes.
Joe Manchin, the guy really is not all that bright. Did you see his quote after he met with Ketanji Brown Jackson?
No, I haven't seen that one. Oh boy, what's that?
Oh boy, how he was very relieved to discover that she's not going to be the kind of judge who interprets what we do.
What is she going to interpret?
I know. She's a very accomplished person, Manchin said, adding, I don't see any red flags. The thing that I was most impressed, I didn't see her trying to interpret the laws that we create. That's pretty important, Manchin said.
All right. I mean, it's an okay thumbs up, I guess, from him, so we'll just take it and move on. But
ignoring the part that Manchin doesn't understand what judges do.
I'm glad to see she doesn't interpret the law. She does, but don't say anything. Don't upset the apple cart, but that's judging, guy. But you're glad to see she doesn't do it? All right, me too. Very glad. What?
If it means you're not going to block her, fine. But really, that somebody this...
He only half understands what that complaint is when Republicans make it.
Right.
I guess. Right? They say, well, we just want balls and strikes. Just read the law. It all has to be interpreted. He's trying to use the activist judge
I don't know what he's trying to do, but once again, he's sounding like an absolute dunderhead.
That's true, and good use of the word there too. Another one we'll revive. Windfall profits, dunderhead. That's very old fashioned. I like it, but it fits, and he's not a smart guy, and that's okay.
He's not a smart guy,
but
And it is incredibly frustrating that a not smart guy was standing between us and having nice things.
Yes, that's the ultimate problem, because I could accept, sacrifice at the request of somebody who's smart and knows what they're doing, I guess. But if it's just random and dumb, that's just kind of bothersome. So, oh well. All right. Well, he's just all over the place and sticking his fingers into everything. When you're dumb, nobody knows whether he's ever washed those fingers. So, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That drives me crazy. The car battery thing. Oh my God. Whatever. And I hate standing in line for gas, so don't sell any cars that don't use gas. What?
I know.
All right, well, sink his boat. That's all I can
say.
Let's do it. But
I'll meet you there.
Leave it to... All right, fine. We don't even know where it is, Joe. Don't worry about it. But it's a limited number of places it could be if you really wanted to sleuth it out. All right. Well, thanks, Joe, and I appreciate your coming by. I'm glad that we're not on... Well, I guess we are back on the verge of a government shutdown, but they figured this one out. They no longer want to play that game.
Happen.
That's
we have a reprieve until October.
Okay. Well, then, let's call every Tuesday until then. Then we'll announce that things are going south again. I appreciate it, and thanks for bringing back all the old and singing all the old tunes with us. And if you find that Trapper John piece, pass it on.
I will send that on to you.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much. Well, we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Time now for us to wrap things up and hand it all over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
From NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
It's a good name for the show, although it's not that easy to speak for as long as we do, I must say. Anyway, he's got some good stuff on. Look, and a little bit of a feature on the new Sound of the War. It says the Sound of the War is changing in Kyiv, not just how you pronounce Kyiv either. We'll find out more about that next. Stay tuned.